Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our INN8 webinar on AI and advice. My name is Michael Summerton, and I look after proposition at our investment platform and marketing at INN8. Our event today, as usual, no slides, just a good conversation, is for all those interested in learning a bit more about artificial intelligence and the role it can play in your financial advice business. I trust you've brought your usual sharp wit along with your favorite cup of coffee or rooibos tea as we're about to embark on an interesting journey of exploration. Our destination, the captivating intersection of artificial intelligence and the business of financial advice, investments, and administration. A landscape where the unique charm of personalization meets the efficiency of automation. It's a bit like combining the creative flair of, say, a jazz musician with the precise timing of a Swiss watchmaker. Personalization is like the jazz musician, individual, dynamic, and full of character. Meanwhile, automation is our Swiss watchmaker, meticulous, reliable, and accurate. Our challenge is to orchestrate a balance between these two, creating a symphony of AI and financial advice. We're going to navigate how we can let the jazz musician improvise without missing the consistent beat of a Swiss watchmaker. So bring your comfy trainers, get yourselves ready for a ride that's not just informative, but an easy framework to help you consider the many potential applications in your business. After all, who wouldn't enjoy the idea of a jazz musician and a Swiss watchmaker creating a beautiful harmony together? Speaking of beautiful harmonies, I have to welcome our guest today. A very warm welcome to Professor Johan Steyn.
Thank you, Mike. So great to be here with you and all your delegates today.
Brilliant. Johan, your official resume reads that you're a human-centered AI advocate, an international speaker, top 50 global voices on AI, founder of AI4Business.net, a research fellow with Stellenbosch University. But maybe, Johan, if you don't mind, perhaps you could just tell me what do you tell people at cocktail parties when they ask that inevitable question, so Johan, what do you do?
Yeah, Mike, it's always a difficult question to answer because I work for myself and I do many things. But essentially, I can divide it into 4 or 5 sections. On the one hand, I do academic work. You mentioned Stellenbosch as a research fellow. I'm also on the adjunct faculty of university in India called Watson University, and I collaborate with some of our local universities around executive education in the AI space. I do some management consulting still. Some of my clients are the large financial providers around their strategies for automation, AI, especially in the HR space, which is a big ticket at the moment, learning and development. I do a lot of writing. I write for Business Day weekly for 2 years now and for some other international brands. I mentor some local startups, which is something I really like doing. And then a lot of speaking. It's really, I think, my goal is demystifying this technology, but focusing, and that's where the human-centered part comes in. What legacy will we leave for our children and their children, given the exponential increase in power of this technology?
Fantastic, Johan. That's a great introduction, and so you're starting to whet our audience's appetite about what's to come. So maybe just a bit of housekeeping. So remember, we love your questions here on our INN8 webinars. And if any of you have experimented with something like ChatGPT, which we're going to explore in a bit, we'd love to see how creative you can get, because you have certainly tried to prompt ChatGPT. So pretend that we're your human intelligence. Hopefully we'll display some intelligence today, but pretend we're your human intelligence and craft your questions as prompts. And we'll see how best we can answer them during the course of the session, and we'll leave 15 minutes at the end to make sure we cover as many as possible. So our objective today is primarily to learn, seek to understand a bit more about the topic, and also make it a bit more tangible for our advisors out there. And so I've sort of bucketed today's discussion into 4 big categories. So first, Johan, you mentioned demystify. What do we mean when we say AI? We're going to disaggregate the topic of AI, disaggregate into a number of different sort of broad categories. let's just throw out some terms there: machine learning, natural language processing, computer vision, robotics, and expert systems. We'll probably spend a bit more time on the natural language processing. That's where sort of the current hype is around AI. And then we're certainly going to dispel some myths. What is it not? What are the real risks, and what should we not be afraid of? And then, we're going to deliberate and decipher and decide, where can this be, with the help of a bit of poetic license there, where can this be applicable for advisors in their business? And so quite a broad topic, but let's dive in, and maybe Johan, just to start to demystify this topic. What do we really mean when we say AI or artificial intelligence?
Mike, I think if you ask 10 people, you will get 10 different answers. Our view on the technology has been greatly influenced by Hollywood movies, killer robots taking over our cities, taking over our jobs. On the one hand, it's the most powerful technology we humans have ever created, but it's not nearly as smart yet as most people think it is. About a year ago, my father asked me, what is this AI stuff that I do? And he's a smart man, but he's not a technologist. And I really struggle to explain it because, we are so used to our kind of tech lingo and IoT and cloud and stuff that it really challenged me to drum it down. And I've got a simple little way of explaining it to people. And I think a better word is non-human intelligence than artificial intelligence. And I often speak about smart technology or the smart technology era, because artificial intelligence really makes it sound so weird for many of us. And what I do, and this is what I figured out when I had to answer my dad, and I think it'll help our delegates as well, is I say, or I tell the story, when we as humans do work, there are four main things that we do. On the one hand, we can see and we can read. So we can read an email, a client kind of inquiry, an instruction, and we can understand what it means. And then secondly, we can execute on that inquiry. We can actually do the work, send the email, send the quote, and so forth. Thirdly, we have the ability to understand language, but not just English or Zulu or Afrikaans. We can also understand the nuances, whether somebody is frustrated, whether they are honest or dishonest. We can pick up some of those things in the way people speak. And then fourthly, we have the ability to learn. We keep on learning through our mistakes, from new information, from courses that we're doing. And then I say AI has the ability to mimic human work in those four categories. On the one hand, it can see, and there we speak about computer vision. If we think about self-driving cars, if we think of optical character recognition, drawing insights from documents. Secondly, it can also execute tasks. And here we talk about robotic process automation. Intelligent or hyper automation is the kind of the thing we talk about these days, mainly focused on kind of back office repetitive administrative tasks. These algorithms are getting so much better at understanding human language, producing human language, understanding nuances. There's a big play in contact centers, for instance, to pick up what a customer is really trying to say and their levels of frustration, for instance. And then, of course, learning, and we're going to touch on machine learning, but it's the ability for these algorithms using large data sets to keep on looking at patterns, learning and doing things better and better. So it's non-human intelligence. It's essentially computer code and algorithms, and it's not nearly as smart as humans in many aspects. It's very limited at this stage. And I think the question of the future is, how much more smart will it get? Will it become equally smart than humans? Will it become much more smarter than humans? And what kind of world will that leave us with? So that was a mouthful. It's the ability to do the simple tasks that humans can do at the moment. I think hopefully that answers the question, Mike.
Absolutely, sure. So just to make it practical, where would we, as sort of average everyday citizens, have encountered AI in our day-to-day without even knowing it?
Primarily on your smartphone. Almost, if not every application that you use is infused with artificial intelligence, pattern recognition, and the like. If you use Google Maps or Waze, It's artificial intelligence driven, your social media feeds, your online banking, everything we do from a mobile phone, a smartphone point of view. But most of the interactions we have with our banks, with our telco providers, our insurance providers, are somewhere or another infused with it. It's almost as prevalent as electricity, which is a funny thing to say in our country, because I think we are still in the second industrial revolution where, we had to start producing and distributing electricity, but it is everywhere. Just using the internet. I mean, this call that we're doing now on Zoom is infused by elements of artificial intelligence. So it is everywhere. And most of us have smart devices in our homes, smart speakers. You even get fridges who can order and replenish stock, in some homes, security systems, facial recognition cameras. I think it's almost everywhere already, even though we don't always know it. And that's also a bit scary, I think.
Okay, so I guess it's nothing new. It's been around for a while, but there seems to be this sort of a lot of hype at the moment, and it was very much around the launch of ChatGPT only a few short months ago, and maybe we could just dive into what is GPT. It seems like when I think of rollerblades, you call all inline skates rollerblades, but actually rollerblades was a brand that became sort of a name for a whole category of things. So maybe we could what is ChatGPT?
Just to maybe step back a bit, Mike, and on your comment, it's been around for a while. I mean, it's been around for about 60 or so odd years, this idea of artificially intelligent systems. Some of you might have heard of the Turing test, Alan Turing from the Second World War. And the Turing test is essentially if you are interacting with a non-human entity without knowing it's not a human, then essentially it has passed the Turing test, which is happening these days more and more. It's so human-like, and again, contact centers are often a great example in some cases. ChatGPT really, I think, brought AI front and center to a lot of people who are not in technology or technologists. Now, GPT means Generative Pre-trained Transformer Model. It's a big term, but it's essentially the ability for these algorithms to very quickly and often very effectively scrape as much information on the internet as possible to determine the best answer to your query. Now, and we can also talk here about large language models. Now, OpenAI with ChatGPT were definitely not the first. There were many such models in existence already. But I think they just got it right at the right time, launching it in November, making it open for everyone to use. And they were very smart in doing it, because how do these models learn? It's by millions and millions of people using it. And then, I think it was in Feb when they launched GTP4, which is a multimodal model. It's still not that good, I think, from ingesting pictures and large documents, or even videos or audio files. But there are a multitude of other large language models, free, most of them, out there for us to use, and a lot of them are focused on very specific tasks. Some, for instance, will focus only on legal documents, looking at, ingesting a 300-page non-disclosure agreement, and it will pick up the main trends, things to look out for, and so forth. And we often speak about perimeters, and the easy way for me to explain it, it's almost like an octopus with tentacles. And a perimeter is the amount of tentacles that these large language models have to take the information that's out there and to form an answer to your question. Now, GTP3 had about 175 billion perimeters. And we reckon that GTP4 have about 1 trillion perimeters. So it's the ability and the speed of scraping this information. The challenge here is, remember, if all of us who have been browsing the internet, there's a lot of good stuff and useful stuff out there, but there's so much nonsense. And these large language models use unregulated information on the internet. And this is where the problem of biases, discrimination, etc., can come in. Although a lot of these platforms have been doing a lot to make sure that we don't receive racist or sexist kind of answers. But sometimes you do get it. And one example I want to use OpenAI's other platform is called DALL-E. And again, there are a myriad of these, which are text-to-image platforms. So you say, as a prompt, draw a painting in the style of Van Gogh of a leadership team. And it will think a little bit, and the images it produces are amazing. But any role that have traditionally been associated from a male dominance point of view, like leadership, will produce mostly male and Caucasian-looking images, which is a challenge. If you ask it to draw a picture of a family, it will mostly be of a man and a woman and a child or children. But a family is also a single parent or a same-sex couple or a childless couple family. So I think that's just the challenge. There's so much promise that these perimeters can find all this information. It's unregulated. And that's why it still needs us as humans to review and to use our own common sense and judgment based on the information that we have received from these large language models. The business use are potentially incredible. I'm sure we'll unpack that as we go further in this conversation, Mike.
Thanks, Johan. So I guess if I think back to, sure, maybe giving away my age a bit here, but first year varsity, doing a bit of first year computer science, you had to know a bit of coding to engage with the computing power of a personal computer. And so it was, C# or whatever it is. And these days there's things like Python, which make it much easier to engage with software. And I guess what things like ChatGPT and other large language models have done is they've sort of leveled the playing field, is that you no longer need to know any sort of coding language to be able to get really powerful results and computing power at your disposal. And perhaps that's part of why there's a lot of hype around this, because you've got the sort of creativity of humanity engaging with the computing power of all these different systems.
Absolutely. And again, it will not replace what only humans can do. And I think we'll touch on this theme over and over. And I think for everyone on the call, that question should linger, is where do I use this technology that's very good at certain things? And what's the balance between me as a person with experience, with insights, with intuition, especially when it comes to the financial well-being of other people? I often say, if I wake up tomorrow and my bank account has been hacked, I don't want to chat to a chatbot or a contact center agent. I will drive to the branch and not leave until I've spoken to the manager and they've sorted it out, because it's so close to my skin. Healthcare even more so. I mean, if a hospital uses an automated decisioning system to determine when my sick son can see a doctor, now it's no longer almost this armchair philosophizing about technology. It's becoming more and more real life applicable. But you are right, it's leveling the playing field. We speak here about democratizing AI or data sets, but I would still want an experienced coder to write a program. He or she might use elements of ChatGPT to help them with code reviews and the like. But I think these systems can still not duplicate human experience and expertise. So that's a fine balance. And I think the challenge for us is, where should we focus our expertise and what should we let the algorithms do that it can do better than us?
A great example of, I guess, a combination of machine learning. So the famous example of machine learning is where they taught the computer to recognize whether a picture is a cat or not. Is this a cat? No. Is this a cat? Yes. And after a while, it became very good at identifying cats. Now, they've obviously transformed this over the years, and you now have expert systems which can look at pictures of potential malignant tumors on people's skin, and they can, with a high probability of success, predict whether that's going to be cancerous or not. You can then take, that really high accuracy through machine learning, because they feed literally thousands of images which are tagged, either cancerous or not, into the system. They can then, off the back of that, build expert systems, and a good example in the medical field is optimizing treatment plans using the patient's own personal circumstances and a whole lot of data on how effective the various drugs are in different circumstances to curate that optimal treatment plan for the patient, with obviously great outcomes for them. And it takes a lot of the sort of mundane work off of the specialists, the doctors, etc. And so that's a good example of an expert system, which is a hybrid of human and AI working together.
Absolutely. And, for me, machine learning, the best way to explain it is it's the ability to see patterns in large data sets that we as humans are just not able to see. And if you think of your client base, I mean, what are the spending patterns? What are the behavioral analytics that you can see in how they spend, how they buy, and so forth? But to use it more than just looking at historical data, but looking at predictive analytics. So based on the spending behavior, but also based on external factors like, last year, July, when we had those horrible things happening in KwaZulu-Natal. We look at weather patterns, natural disasters, if we look at larger economic situations, to almost put that on top of all this data we have on our clients and to very accurately start preempting and predicting their needs. And that's where this novelty kind of conversation comes in. I mean, we all hate it when a contact center agent phones us because it's mostly about gym membership and insurance. And I feel sorry for them. And I try to be very nice because they're doing a job. They have to make 200 or 300 outbound calls a day, but they often are not empowered with the right data. So the pitch they make to me and to many of us on this webinar are often so irrelevant that we get frustrated by it. But if you can phone me, say for instance, my bank phones me with a product that is 100% suited to my needs, but I did not even know that kind of a product exists. Imagine how much better that call will go. I would actually be happy that they've called me. But most of the calls I get from my bank, like us on this webinar, are based on static data. It's not relevant to me. It's a one-size-fits-all, throwing mud against the wall and see what sticks. In the age of big data for large and small firms, we no longer have that excuse not to give hyper-personalized, effective, predictive advice and product solutions to our clients anymore.
So maybe that's a great segue into, and we're going to talk a bit more about some of the practical use cases in sort of the advisor world. But before we jump into that, maybe we can just dispel some of the sort of myths and cover some of the real risks around sort of artificial intelligence and some of the things we've been talking about.
Yeah, it's we these days we talk for the last few years about artificial narrow intelligence, which means it's very good at some narrow tasks, repetitive tasks. And I'll give you some examples. The next era we're going into, and we all are having philosophical conversations, is it in 5 years or 10 years or more? It's called artificial general intelligence, which is when it's no longer narrow tasks. In fact, it could mimic and do better pretty much all the jobs we are doing at the moment. And then following that will be what we call super intelligence or the singularity, which is a real doomsday scenario, which might be only in our children or their children's lifetime. But I think some of the myths are around how powerful this technology really is. I've had clients who think that you just plug and play, you just install it and it will solve your process problems, for instance, and it won't. And because it's exponentially powerful technology, whatever basis you have when you start using it, especially when your data is not in one location, the quality of your data is poor, it will just exponentially amplify the troubles you already have. So there's really this step back and just make sure that before we even look at AI, that we're doing the basics right. It can't fix a toxic work culture, a lack of leadership, people who fear for their jobs or misunderstand their jobs. People who are not good at speaking with customers. Yes, it can do a lot in helping us having that data, giving good advice and so forth, but it is definitely not a silver bullet. It definitely will not fix most of your business problems. In fact, over the last few years, I have solved more business problems with Excel and some rudimentary process automation, not even looking at or getting near artificial intelligence. I think some of the challenges we have, Mike, is that this technology is not regulated anywhere in the world. The European Union has made some big strides. I think just recently there was a lot of press around it, that they are codifying and putting into law certain regulatory frameworks. The US seems to be doing it as well. Sadly, in South Africa, we have absolutely nothing. Yes, we've got privacy in this form of POPIA, which is quite good, from an international standards point of view, but we have no regulation around the ethics of AI. What kind of data can you use on a client? What kind of predictive modeling can you use? And importantly, the biases in our data sets against minority groups, certain genders, and so forth. So that is really a troublesome thing, the fact that our government is not doing anything about it. And it's not just government. Of course, we all should work together. It's a societal responsibility. It's a business responsibility. But October last year, 2 years before that, we had the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And their report was really world class. They made 8 or 9 recommendations, and one of them is regulatory frameworks. And now we are 2.5 years later and nothing. I mean, we're struggling to keep the lights on. I don't know if our government have the ability, sadly, to look at regulatory frameworks. A lot of businesses are looking at their own internal regulatory frameworks from a responsible data use point of view. For even Popia says that we can't, as many of you know, you can't use the data for purposes other than what your clients gave you permission to do. The risk and almost the temptation here is that we are harvesting so much data on our clients that it's very tempting to use that data from a modeling and from a predictive analytics point of view, other than what we had permission to use it for, to upsell and cross-sell. And one example that I often think about, I get like all of us, when you make a transaction, when you swipe your card, you get an SMS that will tell you you've just spent this money. It's great. If you didn't do it, you can immediately call your bank. Somebody's using my card. But those SMSs are going through my mobile network and their computers. So even though my mobile provider cannot access my bank account, they are essentially seeing all my financial transactions, and it's produced as SMSs. Now imagine what they can do with that knowledge to upsell their own financial services to me. And I think that's a challenge. On the one hand, Mike, it's not that powerful, definitely can't solve most of the business problems we currently deal with. But the idea of ethics and responsibility in the lack of regulatory frameworks is becoming more and more of a big issue.
Absolutely. And Johan, sort of making it a bit more practical with some of the things to watch out for, and we've sort of used large language models as an example. And while something like ChatGPT may be really good at summarizing, large pieces of text, you mentioned inferring sentiment, for example, in customer reviews, transforming big texts into something else, correcting grammar and that sort, or even automating the writing of emails. It's not very good. In fact, it's terrible at some things. And often, like, one thing is the truth. You shouldn't expect the truth from large language models, because that's not what they're trying to give you. For example, if you asked it, what is the capital of France? It might give you back the answer, what is the capital of Portugal? Because that's the most likely answer based on its data. So I guess the things to be wary and aware of is, when engaging with large language models, for that example, is that you have to understand what you're asking and then also go and double check what you're being given. So oftentimes it's a bit like a well-meaning child. It wants to make you satisfied. And so I guess, particularly when you're sort of dealing with investments and advice, you want to be quite precise with the information. So large language models, for now, may not be the answer to all of your questions. And if we fast forward into the future, lots of companies are developing their own sort of in-house generative pre-trained models. And so you could, for example, have a beautifully sort of constructed database which you can query on policy, on investment information, on your own client data for your specific use case. So I think there's lots of opportunity here, but for now, one should be very careful when using large language models.
Because it's still very limited. And again, it's all about how you prompt it, and we can touch on that a bit. But again, it uses unregulated information on the internet. Now, it might be 80 or 90% accurate and ethical, so it does help, but it does not replace the human with experience to review the answers, because sometimes it really does get it wrong. And another concern with something like ChatGPT, I mean, if you take a spreadsheet, and I mean, there's a lot of fun to play with these large language models, but if you copy and paste the spreadsheet into it, and that could be, for instance, your customer spending patterns, and you ask it for an analysis, I'm quite blown away by how very high level summarized it gives very accurate trends and things to look for. But the moment I put all of that data into ChatGPT and I press enter, the question is, where does the data go? From a not just a regulatory compliance or privacy point of view, because this is now personally identifiable information that I put into it, because it goes to the cloud and it goes to Silicon Valley. And we had a problem about a month ago where ChatGPT started revealing some of their clients' names and some of their clients' banking details. They shut it down very quickly, but these things can happen. And that brings us to what you've mentioned, Mike, where internal ring-fenced large language models seems to be what a lot of banks and insurance companies and telcos and others are busy building. So in other words, we can only use the data that we have. It's secure, it can't leak. Somebody from the outside can't use it. But we essentially are moving from questions or search to answers. And I'll give you some business examples, but we have this battle between Google and Microsoft at the moment, with Microsoft with their more than $10 billion investment in OpenAI. And if you're a Bing user on your mobile phone, and then some of us already on our browsers, you actually see two parts of the screen. And then Google is starting to roll this out with Bard as well. Because think of it, if you do a search, you don't really get the answer. You essentially get homework, because the search engine will give you, and very accurately, the most probable websites that will contain the information you're looking for. But you're not answering my question. You're giving me sites to go and click on and dig into and see. So if I say, what's the weather like tomorrow, I'll most likely find News24 and weather.com, etc. But tell me, give me the answer. And in Bing at the moment, and I think Google will start rolling out more and more, is on the one end of the screen, you'll get your probable links, but it will also attempt to answer the question. Now, an example I like to use, if you think of an internal large language model, and especially the larger firms, some of the large consulting firms that I've worked for. Say, for instance, I want to take paternity leave in October. Now I need to do a lot of homework. I first need to find the leave policy. What is the company's leave policy? I need to look at the labor law. The labor law, for instance, might say 5 days. I need to look at my leave schedule. How much leave will I have by that time? And what kind of leave might I lose if I don't take it in time? What are the public holidays around those times? And also, have I been booked on any projects around that time? So I need to go to 6 or 7 platforms. It'll take me a few hours, where I wish I could just get an answer. Now, a large language model should use all the platforms I've just mentioned. And the ideal answer would be, yes, you can take paternity leave in October. 5 days is the law. The company will give you another 2 days. Remember that there's one public holiday in that time. If you don't take leave before then, you'll have another 5 days. But also remember, you've already been booked on projects with customer X and Y. Speak to your line managers. In other words, just give me an answer. Don't give me homework. Now imagine working, advising a client, and all the different data sets available on that client. You can ask this large language model to give you a meaningful answer, and you don't have to go through all of these spreadsheets and systems. So I think that's where we will start seeing a lot more use of these models, ring-fenced, secure. It's not going out to Silicon Valley. And that's an important thing. So even for people on the call, play around with ChatGPT, and we'll talk about some of the prompting. But be careful with the information you put in there, especially if it is against privacy compliance, because you don't know where that information is going and who might be using it for other purposes. So that's really important. Anonymize that data, look at some of the trends in the spreadsheet. You mentioned content creation. It's really, I think, good at that. For instance, if you ask it to analyze a spreadsheet, Mike, and I'll almost be done with this answer because I can go on forever. I love it. If you say, explain it like you would to a child, like you've referred to. So I use the anonymized data sets of employees, start date, end date, gender, salary, and so forth level. And as a child, it would say there are more boys than girls in this company. And that's not always a good thing. And then it starts explaining it. Then I asked it to answer me as a narcissist. And it will give you an answer like, I'm the only person in the world who can answer this question. You can only listen to me. Then I asked it to answer it to me in Afrikaans. which, because I'm Afrikaans, it was factually and grammatically accurate. Then I used Google Translate. I asked for isiZulu and Xhosa. I asked for Hebrew. It started all Arabic, writing from the right to the left. It was amazing. But that's fun to play with. I think what we're grappling with is, how do I use it as a business owner? And despite all these privacy concerns and stuff. But yeah.
So Johan, you just sparked a thought there. In doing some research for this discussion, I listened to a session last week, which Jordan Peterson hosted on specifically around ChatGPT, and he had two sort of real main insights with his guest at the time. The one was that in his engagement, the research capability is, in his estimation, was around about a PhD student level. So you're getting sort of high quality level of ability to research things using large language models. And then this is the interesting insight for me was, he said, when you get original thinkers, like truly original thinkers, they're often experts in sort of multiple different domains. And I think the example he used was marble sculpting, ancient Greek mythology, and sort of theology of Christianity, sort of making connections between three seemingly very disparate topics. And with large language models and the computing power we have today, you have the ability to go really deep on almost any subject and also really broad across many. And so that was the fascinating thing for me. You've got this unparalleled level of research ability and the ability to make connections. Sort of your possibilities are endless. But let's maybe just narrow it down for a bit. It's been really fun exploring many different possibilities. But if we think about the day-to-day, running an advisor's business or engaging with clients, some of the sort of activities that they spend a lot of time doing.
I don't know if it's just me. Simone, mic's frozen.
Testing 1, 2.
There we go. Mike, I see. Sorry, your internet is a little red bar thingy. But anyway, you're back now. I missed the last half a minute or so, I think.
Sorry, I'm going to go back, Johan. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Okay, great. So I guess I'm trying to make it practical for advisors, and some of their sort of time sinks, which they experience on a weekly basis, is one of them is client meetings, high value add, but also you want to personalize those. So how do they get to know more about their clients, and potentially the actions that come off of a client meeting, like summarizing the minutes, making sure you track all the actions, potentially going off and reviewing some portfolio performance. How can, and let's not call it AI, but how can software or tech help us save ourselves time so we can do more client meetings and less of the admin stuff?
Yeah, I think in all jobs, especially client-facing jobs, we need to ask ourselves, if you just high level, if you draw yourself an image or a pie chart, firstly, what am I currently spending time on? What is taking up most of my time? And then a second image or picture on, in an ideal world, where would I like to spend most of my time on doing? And it's often two disparate kind of pictures. So think of I often speak about taking the robot out of the human, because again, what are the things that you as a human, experienced professional and an advisor are good at? It's based on experience. It's based on a knowledge of your customer. It's that ability to look somebody in the face with empathy and to guide them, almost to handhold them. You can't AI that. But setting up meetings, following up actions, looking at documents, etc. I'm not saying that's not important, but let the algorithms do most of the heavy lifting. You as a human will still have to double check and review it. But just start at the most basic level of repetitive, mundane, administrative kind of tasks. Those are very easily automatable. That could, for instance, be you receive a document that you need to analyze, and there's certain key actions from that document. That software can already do for you. You can just double check it maybe, but you don't have to read through the 40 pages. The reminder of I need to send an email to this person and ask that thing based on the one thing in this document. I need to double check if this information is right in another system. So accessing different systems is already very automatable if you set it up correctly. Even the idea of setting up meetings with clients, you can automate to a large extent, because if you can, the system will know where you are based, and given the geography of your client, how much travel time there will be. Imagine you can pull in a Google that kind of the traffic information to know generally at 8 o'clock to get to Rosebank from where I live is 40 minutes longer, et cetera, et cetera. So you can automate the decisioning around your availability so that the system can look at your calendar, and there's certain days and times that you could have opened up to say, these are the days I want to see clients. It can also prioritize the clients that you need to see. Again, you can double check that. And then it can ping those clients. And we can talk here about multiple methods. It could be a WhatsApp message or an SMS or an email saying, love to come and see you. Here's a summary of why. Here are 4 slots. Click on the one that suits you best. And then it auto-fills and blocks your diary. Again, that technology already exists. So just again, think of what are the most important things to spend your time on, and what are the things that you wish an assistant or a computer could do for you. And you approach it in that way. And start with the most simple things, even if it is just looking at documents for accuracy. That's a great start. You don't have to AI or automate your whole business. Look at the little things that will make a big impact on how you run your business. And they are often time-consuming, repetitive, low-value tasks. Just start there. Approach it in a common sense way. Start small and look at, and I think we're going to touch on vendors and platforms, look at the right technology. A lot of people on this webinar already have the technology that they need. You're just not using it. If you use the Microsoft suite of tools, and there are others, you can already automate a lot of things. You don't need to be a computer engineer, just figuring out how to do some of these automated kind of appointments and stuff like that. So use common sense. What are the things that's taking up time that you wish somebody else could do? Look at automating some of those things, Mike. And then it sets you free. And that's, again, taking the robot out of the human. Because some people might say, I wish I could spend 80% of my time in high-value client meetings, empowered with the predictive analytics to really help them. You can get there. Why figure out how long it's going to take to drive somewhere and what documents you need to take with you and what the documents say? I hope that makes sense. I said a lot.
So I call it the completeness check, and I suppose we could go through many, many examples, but the completeness check for me is take this meeting I had with the client and summarize it and make sure I cover all the actions. And you may have discussed something, tangentially, which then actually is quite important to the client. And following up with the answer a day or a week, whenever you get it later, it's that personal touch and reminder which cements that client relationship. I guess I'm also looking forward to, as part of this completeness check, is identifying blind spots. So one of the valuable sort of criteria for having a financial advisor is that they hold up a mirror to the client and they say, objectively, this is where I see some of your problems might be. Whether it's your spouse has running their own business and they don't have any income protection, as an example. I think in the future, AI might be able to, using the client circumstances, much better highlight those blind spots, which perhaps advisor and client might miss in the meeting.
Absolutely. So, again, that goes back, Mike, to pattern recognition, and it's how we set them up. But there will be things that we miss that we don't see. And just to give you an example on what I do with some of my meetings, so obviously I ask a client, can I audio record it on my phone, or I've got a little recording device. There are many platforms. I use one called Otter.ai, which transcribes it quite accurately. And then I take that text into ChatGPT and I say, summarize this chat or this conversation, give me highlights of follow-up actions. As long as the audio quality is good and the pronunciation is fairly understandable, that's just an easy way for me to do it. And then you can automate certain actions. The point is, you don't want to use all these different platforms. How do you bring it together? How can I take that audio recording, put it into my laptop, and the summary, the actions, everything already happens for me? I think we are going to get to that place where one platform or an ecosystem of platforms could potentially do all of that for us.
Fantastic. So I'm just conscious of time. We've got 15 minutes left, and we've got a few questions coming through. Thanks everyone for all your amazing prompts. So Anonymous asks, it's quite a specific question, but let's try it anyway. Johan, it says, what are your thoughts on the resignation of Geoffrey Hinton, a cognitive psychologist and computer scientist who regrets the work he's done regarding the development of AI and the warnings he has issued? So that, I guess that's an existential threat question. And, we did debate about some of the regulatory things, but how would you suggest sort of people like us think about that problem?
But just on Hinton, I mean, he's considered one of the fathers of AI. Last few years, he worked at Google. But the main reason he left Google is because he's retiring. He's in his 80s. But the news media has made a lot of it, although he has on various platforms expressed that we are building something that we are slowly losing control over. So he is careful of it. But I think that he didn't leave in disgust or something. He left because he retired. But we have to listen to people like him. And, a few months ago, weeks even, we had those 1,000 signature document, Elon Musk and others warning about AI. We should put a moratorium on its development. I just don't think we can stop the steam train. We never as humans could have stopped technological advance. Whether it was from making our first bows and arrows and spears to AI. It should just be a wake-up call again for all of us, but especially governments and regulatory bodies, that this is no longer something to sit back and watch. It is getting out of hand. So as for normal people like us, it is, again, take all the hype and the news and the warning with a pinch of salt. Don't be an ostrich with your head in the sand, because it is happening. It's going to impact us more and more. I can't even imagine the world my son and his children will live in from an automation and a surveillance point of view. But let's use this technology responsibly and to our benefit. One of the best quotes I heard, and it's tongue-in-cheek, Mike, but this person said, AI will eventually kill us, but in the meanwhile, there's a lot of money to be made. So let's use it with common sense and practically and responsibly in our businesses. But we need to listen to voices like Hinton, but through the right lens, I think. Hopefully that answers that person's question.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thanks, Johan. So something which is an interesting topic which came in the questions is, what about criminal activity? We've all seen the rise of very, very sophisticated criminal syndicates, and increasingly they're using sort of the internet. I mean, certainly my Gmail junk folder is full of Nigerian princes offering me millions of euros. So I guess, and maybe I can have a go, Johan, and you can okay, tell me what you think of the answer. So it's very interesting to explore security topics. And in a way, it's always been an arms race, right? The good guys against the bad. And what I think we're going to see is AI is going to unlock an ability for private citizens to have much more ownership over their own data and permissioning around that data and use it in a very specific set of circumstances. It's also going to empower sort of the traditional bastions of security, like the big corporates and government agencies, to more quickly track down and identify some of these criminals. So while I don't think you'll ever have a massive swing one way or the other, you must remember that these tools are being used by both the good guys and the bad.
I fully agree. And again, it's the history of all the tools we've ever made. I sharpen my knife to kill an animal to feed my family, or do I sharpen it to kill my neighbor? And it's sometimes I think the criminals are ahead of us in technological advance. The ability to personalize, and we read about deep fakes. Deep fakes is becoming a huge problem. The ability through an audio recording or a video recording to almost 100% accurately impersonate somebody else. One of the challenges with something like ChatGPT is that it can produce such familiar human-like language that you think it is your spouse or your boss that sent it, because It uses the same nuances, the same way that you're always being greeted in the email. It gives you, it almost lets you lower your guard and revealing more and more information. It's called social engineering. I don't know. The problem we have is case law, again, is non-existent. If I have to present in front of a judge, my evidence is an audio recording where Johan said he wants to kill me. How do we prove that I've really said that? So security is becoming a problem. I dealt with a local company the other day who are building a very interesting platform. If you think of when you use your mobile phone, or for that matter, when you type on a keyboard, the way you type is personally identifiable. The keystrokes, the rhythm, etc. But also the way I hold my phone, the angle at which I hold it, etc., is personally identifiable. And this platform, and they're now looking at selling it to the banks, is if I use my banking app, but the rhythm at which I type or the angle at which I hold the phone is against the way I typically do it, it will freeze the transaction, flag it. So hopefully the good guys are becoming smarter and smarter, but the criminals are even more empowered than the good guys in using this technology for what they want to achieve.
Maybe we can turn to one of the excellent answers if I evaluate through the prompt lens, is Mr. Bradshaw says, you are an expert on the application of large language models to business opportunities. Okay, so he's told me to act in a certain way. And then here's the context. Given this is a very global technology, where do you think South Africa has a relative advantage? And then lastly, the output. Please format your answer as a short answer for use in an interesting Zoom discussion.
Right. Yeah. Are you going to give it a shot, or should I, Mike?
Well, I've got an idea on South Africa as a relative advantage, but you go ahead, Johan.
Yeah. Look, it's so difficult to answer it as a short answer. We are so far behind not only the world, but most African countries in our data use, in our regulatory framework, in our understanding. They definitely, from an education and a healthcare point of view, we can greatly benefit from this technology. But I sometimes almost fear that we have missed the ship already, given where this technology is going. I hope that's short enough and honest enough. And just again, my opinion.
So I'm going to be contrarian, Johan, and possibly optimistic. So one of our problems in South Africa, and we're getting off the topic of AI, is that our educational system fails us. So we get graduates leaving matric and they have to spend a year, 2 years just getting ready for varsity somehow. And so, but the upside is that almost every person in South Africa has access to a mobile phone, and pretty soon you'll be able to get learning courses designed specifically for individuals based on their performance on a set of standardized tests. And then what AI can do is it can craft learning for you to take you from whatever level you're at. And so it's almost like a customized teacher. You don't have to sit in a class of 70 pupils. You can engage with your tablet or your phone, and very quickly, and I think the data is there, that if you spend a year in sort of a customized course, you can cover up to 3 years of traditional schooling. And so I think that's a formative sort of base layer which AI can help, given access to the internet and mobile phones. And then I think we can start to leapfrog the distance we've currently got between where we're at in terms of our general sort of excellence and the rest of the world. Yeah, maybe that's a slightly more optimistic answer. Mr. Larry says, compliance is a talking topic. How can AI help make things easier?
Yeah, look, there are, and it is a huge topic, especially in the financial services space, and there are various tools that can help you with regulatory reporting, for instance, assessments and the like. Yeah, it's a huge topic, and again, various tools, but because we have such large data sets on our clients, and because our businesses are becoming so complex, it is difficult for humans or a team of humans to make sure that we comply. So we need to use the algorithms and the software that we can access and that makes business sense to help us. Again, it's pattern recognition, where the patterns show us we might not be complying, or we are on the road of not complying if we're not fixing this problem. There are some very interesting platforms in this space, especially in the insurance space, that are very good at doing this. But we need the algorithms to help us because it's just too much for human beings to process and to make sense of, I think.
Thanks, Johan. Anonymous says, I spend most of my time writing and sending email, so time wasting. How do we automate and save time doing this?
So I'm a big fan of Microsoft's Copilot. It's a new platform they're launching. It's not been launched yet. Well, we definitely can't access it yet in South Africa, but it's a good example to your question. If you look at some of these demos on YouTube, for instance, and because I often say, I don't think we do work. We do meetings and emails, and then at night we do work, sadly, but we have a lot of email messages to process. But what I've seen in some of these demos, in Outlook, for instance, you can ask it, and remember, it's got the ChatGPT kind of prompting ability in the whole Office 365 suite. So I can, for instance, ask it, prioritize my 5 most important emails. And because it's learning the language, the recipients, it looks at the whole email trail, it can fairly accurately say, these are the 5 emails you have to look at today. And it can also summarize it, because now you have to go, it's now 2 weeks later, you can't even remember what was said 2 weeks ago. It can summarize it and it can recommend what you should do. It can also write a recommended reply to that person, which it won't automatically send. You can just double check it, but it picks up on the topic, the nuances, the data you have in your Microsoft Drive, for instance, on that person. So I would love to start using it because it takes so much time to go through your emails, again, scheduling meetings, and to connect Word with PowerPoint and Excel. How can we automate that? So once Copilot is launched, and I think it's imminent, that's one example. And definitely Microsoft won't be the only ones doing it. I think Gmail or Google will start jumping on something like that with their G Suite of products. We need that because we as humans are doing work that we should not be doing, in my opinion. So that's the philosophical end goal, Mike, of automation for me. It's not, yes, it is lowering costs, efficiencies, increasing efficiencies, etc. But it's philosophically, automation should relieve humans from work that we should never have been doing in the first place. What that means is a long bottle of scotch and a few cigars, but something to think about.
So there's a great number of questions here. I'm just trying to find the best one. So a few of them are sort of, which are the best apps to use? Please give us an example of this app. So we'll do a follow-up wrap up of this session with a few interesting things to go and investigate in your own time. Someone's asking for sort of training on the Microsoft tools. So interestingly, I've found that just using something like ChatGPT helped me become a better Microsoft Office user in a very short amount of time. So I think I wanted to create some really interesting looking graph. And I said, how do I do this? Just walk me through step by step. And you can literally just follow it because it knows the context that you're operating in for that particular task. But certainly the training on your existing suite of tools, and perhaps you're an advisor in a large corporate, go and lobby your IT teams to start investigating these sorts of things. And importantly, augmenting your existing suite of products. You don't necessarily want to add on a new tool.
Yeah.
Johan, we're running out of time. Perhaps maybe just a couple closing remarks from you before I wrap up.
Certainly. Well, firstly, Mike, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. I hope it was meaningful to everyone on the webinar. Remember, everyone, it's increasingly powerful technology. It's not smarter than humans yet or for the foreseeable future. Approach it in a common sense way. Look at the things that common sense and small changes in your business can fix, and rather jumping on this AI bandwagon. The importance of humans and your clients are much more important than technology. This technology, if approached in the right way, can greatly benefit your business. But don't, resign your common sense because it's called AI. You are much smarter than it. And where we're going to go in the future, we're going to have to grapple with as a society. But for now, I think there's a lot more to be excited about than to be fearful of. Thank you, Mike.
Brilliant. Thank you, Han, for joining us on this interesting journey and whirlwind tour of artificial intelligence and the world of financial advice. And I guess let's just remember that while a jazz musician improvises and a Swiss watchmaker maintains precision, together they can create something truly unique and delightful. And I suppose that's our goal. And so just to conclude, just remember, audience, if you took 4 notes today, it's demystify, disaggregate, dispel the myths and risks, acknowledge the real ones, and then decide where you can take action in your practice. And hopefully blend that personal touch with the precision of automation. So giving your clients the best of both worlds. Thank you, everyone, for this enriching journey. And until next time, goodbye.
INN8 is a registered trademark of Stanlib Wealth Management Pty Limited, an authorised financial services provider.